I would like to introduce you to today's presenters. Samira Abdul Karim is an organizational psychologist and consultant for our Blessing White division. She's experienced in instructional design, program development, and facilitation. Samira takes a human-centered approach to organizational development with the overarching goal of increasing productivity and workplace satisfaction among employees and employers. Samira has a keen interest in diversity and inclusion, creating sustainable change in organizations and helping to develop adult learners. Sarah Staley is a senior organization development consultant at Harvard University Center for Workplace Development. Her areas of interest include advancing employee engagement, career development, and talent management initiatives. Sarah manages large projects aimed at increasing employee engagement and innovation at Harvard University and has extensive experience in design and delivery of programs in the areas of interpersonal communication and productivity. Dr. Tolbert is a Senior Director of Inclusive Leadership Initiative and a consultant for Catalyst Global Member Services. She currently heads a leadership development learning platform, Leading with Inclusion, training emerging leaders in inclusive management of diverse teams. In her capacity as a strategy consultant, Dr. Tolbert partners with global organizations to build their capacity to create and sustain inclusive workplace environments. So with all of that said, it is very clear that everyone here is in very qualified hands. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Samira.
I'm excited for our conversation. Hello?
Oh, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Kayla, for starting us off. So to start, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of how we're going to spend the next hour. First, I'm going to share some information with you about why this topic of innovation is important in the first place and why it should matter to organizations. Then Dr. Tolbert will take us through talking through the link between innovation and inclusion. And throughout the next hour, we will hear from Sarah intermittently about how Harvard is engaging these topics and why it matters organizationally for them. Then we'd like to hear from you. So we'll close out the session with a question and answer opportunity, and you're welcome to post your questions throughout, but we'll use that time to address them. So without further ado, let's dive in. So for the most part, I think we all understand the need for innovation, but I'm going to summarize it this way. Organizations that thrive are those who really appreciate the need for continuous change. That need for change is a reflection of the world in which we live. So we are all provide a product or service that fills the need for people, and it is people who are changing. So this is true around the globe. In the US and Canada and Europe, there are demographic changes occurring with regard to ethnic makeup of populations. In emerging markets, there are cultural changes leading to different types of consumers and workplace participation. There are population increases happening, changes to the climate, and to the natural environment that are impacting daily life. So people and lifestyles are changing, and thus institutions need to change with them. We use innovation as a tool to achieve that change and to stay relevant. So many of us understand that innovation is important, but the challenge really is how we achieve that innovation. In a report published by IBM, they mentioned that 70% of executives understand the need for innovation, but the majority of those executives are really unsure about how to cultivate it. In that same report, only 23 employees believe that their organization encourages them to learn from failure. So we're kind of left with the question of how do we create learning institutions where people feel comfortable taking risks, experimenting, and failing? Institutions of all types are asking that question. So you don't believe that this is only a conversation happening among tech companies or consulting companies. It's in fact a subject that crosses industry. Every type of organization needs to innovate, and no one is immune to these challenges. In healthcare, folks are saying innovation is a necessity to meet patients' needs. In consumer products, they're discussed innovation as a way towards sustainability. I even read an article about how it's necessary for nonprofits to create new fundraising models before the Googles and Facebooks and other tech giants figure out the formula to steer charitable giving through their platforms, thus restricting access to donors. So you wouldn't typically think that the Red Cross needs to keep an eye on Google, but in an innovating world, that is the reality. And size also doesn't matter. Many times we think of small startups and entrepreneurs as the sources for innovative ideas, but in one of our programs at Blessing White Outthinker, We partner with Kyan Krippendorf, an expert in innovation, and he uses the term intrapreneur. An intrapreneur is someone who is in an organization, is given the freedom to support to work beyond the boundaries of the company's typical protocols to create something new. And by his measure, 73% of the ideas that have had the most impact on humanity have been created in companies that allow for that type of innovative working environment. So regardless of the type or size of your organization, we all need to engage this question. So let's hear from someone whose organization is steeped in this conversation. I want to invite our special guest, Sarah Staley. Again, she's a senior organizational consultant at Harvard University's Office of Workforce Development. I want to invite her to share some thoughts. So Sarah, I'm going to turn it to you. Thanks again for joining us today. Can you share with us why innovation matters specifically at Harvard?
Hi, everyone. Happy to talk about that. Harvard has a history of innovation, and so there's breakthroughs in various disciplines that are studied here. And recently, as a university, we've been really investing in initiatives in space to help cultivate that innovation, particularly for faculty and students. But in addition to that, we're focused on supporting staff innovation and how we work in innovative ways in the administration. And we're looking for new ways to work together, and alongside the focus on innovation, we're looking to create a campus that's inclusive. And we know that when all voices and people are included in these endeavors, there's more engagement, more creative ideas, and better outcomes. So it's great to be able to focus both on innovation, inclusion, and engagement all together at Harvard.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. And I know there's so many constituencies and many moving parts to your organization. It's really fascinating to hear how innovation can cut across so many of them. And this actually brings me to the next topic I want to discuss. And that is actually what I actually mean by innovation, right? So I've been talking so far about the challenges to innovation and the types of organizations facing those challenges. Let me clarify more what I mean about innovation itself. So we often think of innovation as the next driverless car or virtual reality product. Those are what we call the big I innovations, new products that didn't exist before. But innovation often comes in smaller packages. It can mean really any positive change, and it could look like streamlining a process, automating a form, speeding up a task, improving upon a visual design, improving ways to engage with your customers or how they represent your business offerings, and really any type of positive change. So in fact, by some measure, companies who focus on business model innovations are growing faster than those who focus on product innovation. So there's some argument for focusing on product from processes and business model even more than products. But I'm interested in hearing from you on this topic. And maybe Kayla can just explain how to go ahead and use that poll feature. I'm going to invite you to take a poll, right, and answer this question: how is your organization addressing challenges to innovation? So you can just go ahead and click on one of the poll questions over here on the screen, popping up on the screen to your right. So when I'm asking about changes to strategic direction, this could mean just creating an innovative future for where your company plans to go. Maybe in terms of process changes, maybe there's changes how you process information, how you streamline your restructuring perhaps. In terms of organizational culture, maybe there's a larger focus on collaboration or flexible working environments, for example, or anything else really. So if there's an other, you can feel free to type the other, and then later on type that in your chat box. I'm interested in hearing and what's going on the ground, so to speak.
Well, thanks, Samira. And we've got about 5 seconds left, so if you haven't input your answers, there's definitely a very response here. And I'll actually give it about 10 seconds here, and then we'll be able to apply the results. All right, we'll give it 1 second. And you should see those answers pop up now on the right-hand side.
Awesome. So it looks like we've got a lot of changes happening to the strategic direction. There's kind of maybe some like overall long-term thinking, overall direction goals, which is certainly important and can trickle down to all of these other features as well. So if you're changing your strategic direction, that's certainly going to have an impact on your processes and on your culture and so forth. And it seems like a couple of people aren't really having many innovative conversations at your organizations, but maybe this our conversation today will inspire some of that. You can bring it back to your organization to share. So thanks for participating in that poll. Those are really interesting results. And again, if you've got some other things to say about that, I'm happy it'd be great if you can share that in the chat feature. I'll be interested in hearing what's happening. For now, let's take a closer look at how inclusion is related to innovation and the role that it plays the role that inclusion plays in bringing about positive change in organizations. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tolanda Tolbert to take us through that conversation. Dr. Tolbert, please.
Thanks, Samira. And as Samira was saying before, for most organizations, no matter what kind of industry you're in, innovation is a real key factor to long-term sustainability and to stay competitive. To promote innovation, you really have to have that right ecosystem where innovation can flourish. And our researchers at Catalyst have found that a fundamental element of that ecosystem is inclusion. So if we take a step back and look at the basic components necessary for innovation, we can see how the road to innovation is through inclusion. So if we take this from the top, we can see that although people may not always feel this way, the behavior of managers and leaders creates the weather for their employees. And behaviors that send a really clear message about having an employee's best interest at heart create feelings of psychological safety for employees. The more employees feel safe, the more they feel included. And when you feel safe and included, you're really willing to take the risk to innovate. So right now we're going to break this down so that you can understand it a little bit better. And we're going to start off with what are those specific leadership behaviors that drive this ecosystem that promotes more innovation. Catalyst asked this question in our research, and the findings revealed that leaders who enact what we are calling the each mindset make people feel both safe and included, ultimately increasing innovation from employees. So let's kind of unpack this a little bit. Each stands for empowerment, accountability, courage, and humility. So looking at that first piece, empowerment, we're talking here about providing employees with the tools, the knowledge, and opportunity to develop and excel. So an example of an empowering kind of behavior from a manager would be giving somebody a stretch assignment. So when employees feel this investment in their growth, they know that you have their best interest at heart and feel safe. The next piece of this each mindset is accountability. This is really about demonstrating trust and confidence in employees to get the job done. This is on the other end of the spectrum of micromanaging. It's the opposite of micromanaging. It's about letting employees really own their projects so that they are fully accountable for the work that they can control. That trust in people and making sure that they know that you have confidence in them makes people feel safe and included. The next component of this is courage. Courage looks many different ways, but really demonstrating that you can stand up for what's right, even if it's at some kind of personal risk to you. Not just kind of supporting people when times are easy, but also in the difficult times. When leaders and managers role model that kind of courage, employees know that you will have their back and provide air cover if things kind of go off the rails, and that increases feelings of safety and inclusion. This last piece of the each mindset is humility, which just means showing your humanity. You admit mistakes, accept and learn from criticism and different points of view. You're out there actively seeking contributions from others and inviting their input and collaboration. An example of this is, role modeling transparencies about your own imperfections. Let people know that they also can make mistakes and be honest about any shortcomings and still kind of receive support. And that kind of behavior really increases feelings of safety and inclusion. So I like to think about this as empowerment and accountability are kind of like a tightrope where you really want your employees to have those developmental opportunities to be challenged to innovate. It shows that you care and are invested in their actual growth and development. And then the courage and humility pieces can be really seen as a safety net where you want them to feel safe and supported in those challenges so that they can take those risks to innovate. Our research has found that ratings of psychological safety were 80% higher for employees whose managers demonstrated this each mindset. But what do we mean by safety and why is that so important? Actually, it's a professor at Harvard, Amy Edmondson, who has conducted extensive research on the connection between safety and innovation. And her research found the following. Employees feel psychologically safe to innovate when they are willing to take risk regardless of rank or status. That they trust that their teammates are not acting in ways that are kind of backstabbing and undermining their efforts, and that they are confident that they can make those mistakes and they're not going to be kind of put in a box forever because you made one mistake, and those things are not going to be forever held against them. And people feel psychologically safe to innovate when they feel free to speak up about problems and tough issues. You can see how these feelings of psychological safety to take risks and to speak up really set that stage for innovation. You have to feel safe in order to question how things are really being done, and you have to feel safe in order to stand up and kind of go against the grain. And ultimately, you also have to feel safe in order to step outside of the box to innovate. And it follows that you need to feel safe in order to feel included. Because if you don't feel safe, there's no way that you will feel included. We think about this as safety being that special sauce that sets the stage for inclusion. Now, we all intuitively know what we mean by feeling included, but it's a slippery subject where people kind of know it when they feel it, but it's hard to describe. So the Catalyst researchers really set out to understand what specifically gave people those feelings of inclusion. And what we found was that globally there are two conditions that make people feel included. Let's look at those findings. All right, so inclusion was really defined by two key elements. Feelings of belongingness, like you are part of the team, an insider, and feelings of uniqueness, feeling valued for your unique perspective and how you are different. So inclusion is that balance of uniqueness and belonging. Inclusive leaders make each member of their team feel like they belong to the group and that each of them is respected for their unique contributions and viewpoints. Catalyst has found when people experience both of these things simultaneously, they report that sense of inclusion. But it's a real delicate balance because if you kind of focus too much on the uniqueness piece, people can really feel that they are tokenized or hyper-visible or like they will never quite fit in. And on the other side, if you focus too much on belonging, like this is how we do it, we're all a team, this is how we feel about things and so forth, people can feel like they have to conform or assimilate to fit in. And in these cases, people become afraid to express a different opinion because they might be excluded. Inclusion is really striking that balance of both uniqueness and belonging. So now that we kind of know what I mean when we're talking about that inclusion, let's look at that impact of inclusion on innovation. Our global research shows that when people feel included in the workplace, it makes a tremendous impact on innovation. Those people who felt included reported a 46% increase in team citizenship behavior. Now that we define team citizenship as going that extra mile above and beyond the call of duty, people using their extra effort, their discretionary time and energy to help colleagues and managers kind of meet whatever kind of organizational goals that you have. And those who felt included reported a 42% increased innovation. And that's about suggesting those new ideas, approaches to problems, and identifying opportunities for new products or processes. So when you look at how inclusion increases these feelings, increases innovation and these team citizenship behaviors, I always think that, if you could do one thing that could get you over 40% better productivity and innovation in your team, it's a no-brainer to kind of do it. Being intentional about inclusion has a real high return on investment. So let's just connect all the dots. So the more that leaders engaged in that each mindset, those each behaviors, empowering their teams, holding them accountable, demonstrating that courage and humility in their interactions, the more that their employees felt psychologically safe. And those feelings of safety in turn set the stage for inclusion, defined by feeling both those elements of uniqueness and belonging. Ultimately, the more employees reported feeling included, the more they reported being innovative at work. Each mindset really drives this chain of events. To get to innovation, we need safety and to feel included. And to make others feel safe and included, we need that each mindset. So if your business or organization really relies on innovation, it is imperative that you cultivate an inclusive and safe environment through these inclusive leadership behaviors. So once we kind of connect the dots on how innovation and inclusion are linked and talk about the key elements that need to be present in that ecosystem in order to promote more innovation, that really sets the foundation where we can discuss the specific culture of the organization so that they can achieve the type of innovation that they seek. Samira?
Thank you, Dr. Tolbert, for walking us through that backdrop. What I find really compelling about this connection is that because it focuses on behaviors of leaders that trickle down throughout the organization, it really does impact the entire culture, and then thus it has an impact on any of those types of innovations that we mentioned earlier. There's a huge opportunity for a trickle effect. And I want to turn it back to Sarah Staley to get her comments on this. Sarah, if you wouldn't mind answering the question, how does inclusion support the various innovation initiatives at Harvard? You touched on it a little bit earlier, but can you give us a little bit more detail?
Sure. So we very much agree with that kind of chain and believe that leader behaviors promote psychological safety, and that psychological safety is necessary for people to feel included and give their ideas and create innovations. So we are very invested in creating more inclusive environment. We've actually been quite invested in innovation as well as a separate topic, providing training on process improvement, problem solving, and design thinking. But as a group that really focuses on developing leadership, we wanted to also kind of bridge that for our participants and train them in behaviors that would increase a culture of both innovation and inclusion.
I like that. Two birds, one stone. Excellent. So I just want to give the listeners a little bit of additional background before we move forward, because Sarah mentioned that she was training her folks in this. So Blessing White and Catalyst have partnered to create a suite of programs called Leading with Inclusion. And in that suite of programs, we offer training that is based off of all the research that Dr. Tolbert just shared. In fact, Dr. Tolbert led this training around inclusion and innovation recently at Harvard to Sarah's team. And with that bit of background, I wanted to hear a little bit more from Sarah about her choice to implement this particular intervention. But before that, I want to give Dr. Tolbert the opportunity to give some context about how all of this research that she mentioned around each mindset and so forth translates into the classroom. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Dr. Tolbert.
All right, thanks, Samira. We translate this in many ways into the classroom. First, we teach our learners what we mean by that psychological safety. We do that through an activity that kind of demonstrates the importance of how leaders respond to people's ideas, and that it's how you respond that ultimately dictates if people continue to offer you ideas, and really exploring that concept of inviting innovation. Then we move on to an activity that gets to the heart of what the cost of a culture of fear is, kind of that opposite of safety. So we do that through a discussion of the participants' personal experiences of being silenced for fear of dissenting from the norm, which taps into those ideas of feeling too unique or not wanting to lose a sense of belonging. We do this so that they can examine those root causes for what makes them and others not feel safe at work, and then take that discussion to its natural conclusion by discussing what are the costs of having a culture of fear where you don't feel free to speak up or bring tough issues up. And in that discussion, we dot in current business examples of the cost of having a culture of fear. One of the ones that we look at, one of the recent ones that we look at is the VW diesel engine scandal, where engineers knew that the cars had this emission issue, but the culture was such that they didn't feel safe to speak up about problems and tough issues, so they created a workaround. And of course, when that was discovered, the company lost billions and the brand suffered immeasurable damages. Because it's really about feeling safe to take risks that's not only foundational to innovation, but also having a workplace culture where you can inform leaders of the red flags so that they can make the best kind of strategic decisions for the organization. Then we move on to an activity that dissects the different kinds of power dynamics that go on in high-pressure decision-making. It's called From Creation to Buy-In. We give participants a relevant task to brainstorm on, but with very limited time that's really kind of high-paced. And in the debrief, we talk about when and why participants felt shut down and didn't intentionally offer up more ideas. We discuss how it felt when their idea wasn't used and what people did to make them feel included and continue to participate. And in the end, we talk about how you say no to people, but in an inclusive way that can make them continue to offer up ideas, because at the end of the day, we can't use everybody's ideas, right? I remember at Harvard, this was a very high energy activity where a lot of negotiation was taking place. And when we kind of did an autopsy on those group dynamics, we saw how collaborative the group really became by utilizing that each mindset skills. Then we move participants into the space of leveraging missteps, because being innovative really requires taking that risk to fail. And we explore their experiences with failure and have them coach each other through mistakes and using it as a learning tool. We do that to really answer the question, how do you leverage failure for more innovation? So through a combination of all of these kind of highly interactive activities, we get the participants to practice each mindset, each behaviors, to create the safe space where employees can thrive as unique individuals, and to understand on a real personal level what's at risk when we don't create that culture of safety, and to understand what to do to cultivate a culture that really invites people to innovate. Samira?
Excellent. Thanks so much for giving us that context of what's happening in the classroom. I'd like to invite you, Sarah, just to share what attracted you to implement a training program specifically, like to support innovation rather than other things. I know you have a lot of different mechanisms for increasing innovation in your organization. And then why did you choose leading with inclusion in particular as your implementation?
So we worked with Blessing White on our university-wide engagement survey in 2015, and the results sort of compelled us to continue to invest in innovation, inclusion, and engagement, and to continue creating new programs. We've been using Blessing White's X model of engagement and the Great Day at Work concepts in our curriculum, and thought we wanted to continue to train our leaders in those skills for cultivating engagement, inclusion, and innovation. And what particularly we liked about the Leading with Inclusion program is that it blended those best practices from Blessing White with the Catalyst research-driven approach. And when we really looked at the curriculum, the content and exercises, along with that grounding in research, were what we were looking to incorporate into our curriculum.
It makes total sense. And you were in the classroom, yeah?
Yes, it was a train the trainer, and so we both had the experience as participants, and we also took it with a lens of how do we want to train this to others outside of the program.
Great. Were there any particular moments that stood out to you, personally or for your group as a whole in the classroom?
Yes, so we're a very tight-knit team of expert facilitators, and it was important to us to explore the content together and recognize we had various comfort levels. And so it was helpful for us to articulate for ourselves the connections between inclusion and innovation, and to consider how to create a safe space for discussion when facilitating the content with others, as well as with each other. And I think these conversations have continued, and my colleagues continue to remark that the content is resonating. They've moved their thinking, and their approach to training and consulting and coaching work has been really deepened by this curriculum.
Great. Excellent, thank you. And let's just end up here with one more question. So I know that you're at the very beginning of this implementation and the execution of your training throughout your organization, but I'd like to know what impact would you like to see develop from this, and how will you measure the success of that?
So we hope that the work that with this kind of multiple focus of an innovation, inclusion, and engagement would be measured both kind of quantitatively through our next engagement survey, and we will be collecting evaluations and feedback from the programs that we offer. But we also want to gather some qualitative data about sort of what is the depth of conversation in the classroom, what's the depth of conversation created outside the classroom, are we seeing more innovative ideas, are there better outcomes for how we innovate as a university. We're looking to see more collaborative behaviors, more inclusive behaviors, and we have a university-wide task force that we hope to kind of collaborate with to establish those measures and to share back that information.
Okay. Certainly a holistic approach.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Sarah and Dr. Tolbert. I'm actually going to now turn it over to Kayla to take some questions from the folks that have been listening on, and I will switch it over to you now, Kayla.
Thank you, thank you. Well, thank you, Dr. Tolbert, Sarah, and Samira for that great discussion. We have some time left over for questions. I know quite a few have already come in. Before we get to that, though, I do want to remind you, if you have a question for one of our presenters, go ahead and enter it into the Q&A module at this time. It can be found in the lower right-hand panel of WebEx. We'll be sure to try to address those. They've covered a lot in the last 35 minutes or so, and obviously there's a lot more that we could discuss, so we do encourage you to continue the conversation beyond today's session. And Samira and Dr. Tolbert's contact info is available in the slide deck, and we'll be sure to send everyone a link to a follow-up blog post where they'll be addressing some of today's key takeaways. I'd also like to remind everyone that the recording and slides from today will be sent to the email address that you provided when you registered. So without further ado, there are a lot of questions coming in, so go ahead and get started with that Q&A. The first one I'm going to throw out here is, this one's for actually Dr. Tolbert. Going back to the EACH mindset, can you give an example of a practical application of the EACH competencies?
Sure. Okay, so when we're talking about that EACH mindset, again, this is a very broad in nature. All of these things can look many different ways, but empowerment can be about, creating a coaching culture or being a mentor to people that empowers your employees to develop and excel. And when I think about accountability, managers who elicit input from the team in the goal setting and managing deadlines, so people are creating their own kind of responsibility around things, that is a way to kind of foster more of that accountability. Also, giving people constructive feedback is a way to create accountability around those kinds of things. Courage, of course, again, can look many different ways, but being able to provide air cover, we talked about a little bit about that earlier. That's, when things go wrong, is all of the blame, attention, and negative things kind of falling on the junior people, or are the leaders standing up and deflecting some of that for them and making sure that they're protected somewhat from it. Or just even another courageous thing can be, just inquiring across difference to somebody that you don't necessarily have that much in common with, advocating for, quote unquote, the unusual suspects can be something that's really courageous when you're talking about potential jobs out there. And then humility, just things like, to me, a lot of things that we don't see currently a lot in workplaces is that feedback tends to be a one-direction thing where managers and leaders give feedback to their direct reports, but asking for feedback as a leader and a manager and welcoming it and learning from that is a real way to demonstrate that humility. And when things go right and you're receiving all the kudos, are you just receiving the kudos as the manager or the division lead or whatever it might be, or are you giving recognition to the whole team and showing that humility? Those types of behaviors really help create that psychological safety. Does that answer your question?
Those are fabulous examples. Thank you so much. I'm going to actually turn this next one over to Sarah, I believe, or Samira, you can chime in too. But Sarah, why did you choose a train-a-trainer session versus a traditional training session?
So our choice had to do with a few things. Our team is well-versed in facilitation, so we wanted to sort of just increase our own skills in facilitating the type of content. We wanted to reach as many people as possible, so we put the content, and we also wanted to put the content in the context of what we're already doing and Harvard. So we thought through training our own team that would allow us to reach more people and also allow us to increase our own comfort and skill level in exploring the content.
Thank you. That's what I'm going to throw out to all of you. You can decide amongst yourselves who wants to answer this one. But what are some examples of goals that team members can set in the performance or professional development goals around inclusion? And are the goals in this area just for people managers?
Also, I would say that this is Samira speaking. They're certainly not just for people managers at all. I mean, you can affect change within your team right away by individually utilizing some of those altruistic behaviors Dr. Tolbert explained around the EACH mindset. you can create a processes amongst your unit within your team that really allows for voices to be heard and create kind of a team culture and team dynamic. If you feel like you might not be in the position to kind of have a broader influence in your organization, but I'll turn it over to Dr. Tolbert to make any additions to that question.
No, I absolutely agree with you. This works on the one-to-one scale and the one-to-many scale, of course. One of the reasons why I was contextualizing it in terms of managers and leaders and so forth is because they have specific teams, we were able to measure those globally. Whereas on the one-to-one scale, it's harder to do a study on how many people did that person talk to feel included. And so it definitely works across the board with human beings.
I love it. I'm not a senior manager, but I can certainly take away a lot from this conversation myself and in my roles with those I work with too. So moving on, we have a lot of questions coming in. So this one, actually I think is an important one to address because this has actually come up from 3 folks so far. But do you have any advice for employees on how to bring up the diversity and inclusion to senior management if you think that they don't see it as important?
I'll start that off. Oh, you want to start it off? No, go ahead. I know you've got a lot of the business case ready, so please.
Well, yeah. So I mean, that's the piece really, is that even if people are not kind of believers in inclusion and the value of diversity and so forth, most people are believers in, getting the most out of your workforce. And that's the whole point, is that it is definitely the right thing to do, but it's even more importantly the smart thing to do, because if you are focusing on this inclusion piece, then those team citizenship behaviors typically really speak to people, because if you have your employees going above and beyond the call of duty and spending their extra time doing work and so forth, those are kinds of arguments that are typically very convincing for people who don't just naturally believe that, hey, we should treat people better and value them and make sure that they feel welcome here.
And I'll just add, you have this, as you were listening now, you'll get a copy of this this presentation that has, straight facts and straight research about the positive business impact that inclusion has on organizations as a whole. But also, again, like you can make a difference just within your team. Like if this can and start kind of from the bottom up. So great question, and hopefully you'll use the information that's provided here and information that's also provided both on Catalyst websites and Blessing White websites to spark that conversation in your organization.
This is Sarah. I'll just jump in and agree with that, given that we're a research and education institution, we really do rely on data and research to make arguments for us. So that was one thing that really attracted us to the Catalyst work. Certainly Amy Edmondson being one of our internal experts and being able to point to her research was helpful, and then be able to point to the engagement data that supported that and made it more local. All of those things I think were really helpful ways to get the buy-in that we were looking for.
Overall, finding your champions, in your organization. It might not be happening right now with your direct manager, but there are often kind of pockets of people in your organizations that kind of are starting this conversation. So if you can kind of network and get out there and see who else might be having this, and you can kind of start to create a buzz, that also might be a good strategy to get it going.
And Samira, that actually made me, what you were saying makes me think about one of the things that I see, because I work cross industry, which is one of my favorite words in the world is pilot. So, you know, does your organization have to sign on wholeheartedly to do it? No, but if you can pilot something where you're kind of focusing on inclusion, the results will speak for themselves and help create that argument that you need.
Well, thanks all three of you for joining in on that one. This is a switching gears, but a similar topic and looking at what the organization values. But going back to the inclusion equation, what are your thoughts when an organization does not rely on innovation? You know, where your valuing uniqueness piece is thought of maybe as a distraction.
Well, I'll by saying
go ahead,
that,
Samira.
Sorry, Dr. Salama. Yeah, I'll just start off by saying I think organization, just on the topic of organizations not really valuing or not really kind of relying on innovation, I think I do really believe that every organization relies on innovation in some way. They just might have a different kind of language for it. When you think of innovation as positive change, then any type of change that's occurring in your organization and some kind of change would be necessary just to kind of keep pace with what's happening in the world, what's happening with technology, what's happening with people. So every organization has to consider it to some degree. There just might be a different kind of language for it, but really it is a matter of understanding change and perhaps using inclusion as a tool towards that. So I'll let Dr. Tolwer take it from there.
Thank you, Samira, and I agree with you. You know, what I see in that comment, in that question, is that when somebody says that valuing uniqueness becomes a distraction, at the end of the day, you know, we're all unique. Everybody has a different perspective. So, you know, it's whether we are valuing it or not, it's still there. And so when we don't value people's uniqueness, they start engaging in behavior that we call covering. And that's when you hide parts of yourself so that you fit in more. And the studies show that covering, that requires a lot of energy. And when people are, you know, spending their energy trying to kind of hide their unique perspectives and mute themselves and silence themselves or act a certain way or be a certain way, guess what they're not spending energy doing? Working. So to me, you have to, you know, whether they value that uniqueness part or not, it really comes down to if you don't value the, you know, the uniqueness of individuals so that they can bring their whole selves to work, you won't get all of their ideas or all of their energy and engagement. And so to me, that's really where the choice is.
Great points. And so, Samira, I don't know if you want to add to that anymore or if you want to move on to the next question.
Nope, I think that covers it.
I think so. Covering it too. That was fabulous. All right. So, and I'm not sure, and I don't want to put you guys on the spot, so don't feel like you have to call out specific organizations, but I do want to put this one out there because I think it is important if we do have examples. But do you have any examples of specific organizations who have shifted their culture to one that is safe and inclusive, promoting innovation? And if not, feel free to, we can add that to the blog post later.
Well, at Catalyst, we have a Catalyst Award, And so going into organizations that have really successful inclusion initiatives. And some of our award winners have worked really hard to cultivate cultures of inclusion. Some that come to mind are 3M. Those are the people who make Post-its and stuff like that. Innovation is a key element to their culture, innovation and technology, and they use inclusion as a driver of that. Also, Kimberly-Clark, big company who does kind of B2B, business-to-business engagements, and they engage in a high investment in inclusion. The big companies that we all know, things like Procter & Gamble, that's made so many products that we've seen throughout our lives, basically from diapers to toothpaste. They have been focusing on diversity and inclusion for 15 years, and it keeps increasing the business and increasing their innovation and how they come to market and what markets they expand into and so forth. And so it's just like when you are looking at a growth model where you want to keep on growing as an organization and so forth, getting those new ideas and so forth are really key. And so inclusion really plays a key component into driving those kinds of results.
Great. I'm going to jump right into the next one. We have a few more that have come in. I want to make sure we have time to get to all of them if we can. This one's a little bit longer, so bear with me. How do we move from talking about the positive impact of diversity and inclusion and move to meaningful implementation in the workplace? Many workplaces are interested and have a diversity and inclusion policy, but are missing how to implement and make good on those policies.
I'll start us off. I think, certainly having a D&I policy, having a vision, and having statements, that's a great starting point, and I definitely hear you. Like some folks find it challenging about where you go from there. But you have to think about building an inclusive workplace like a skill, at least like any other, and certainly that's the approach we take here at Blessing White and Catalyst, and why we created this suite of programs to focus on training people to actually be able to change their behavior. Culture change comes with behavior change. So getting people to kind of do things differently and embed that into how you operate as a business, it's a process, certainly, and training folks in that conversation is certainly one way. And there are many other types of implementation you can focus on to promote a D&I strategy. I'll turn it over to Dr. Tolbert because I know that's her specialty, and those other areas that organizations can take on to promote this conversation, but certainly training your employees to be able to be equipped, raising their awareness and raising their skills so that they can change their behavior is a big step in that.
I would completely agree with you, Samira, on that. And so once you give people concrete behaviors to do, then, you have to measure it and you have to evaluate it. And so that you create that accountability. So doing things like in people's yearly evaluations, that inclusion is part of that. Do your direct reports to the people who work with you, do they feel heard around you? Do they feel like you value their opinion? Do they feel like that they belong to that team? Do they feel like they get opportunities and information is shared with them? And these kinds of questions to make sure that there is a kind of concrete evaluation component of measuring that inclusion. And then not only that, but just holding people responsible, right? And so at the end of the day, there's a lot of people who go through organizations and who are successful who might be bad actors out there. But when do we start making that a deal breaker of like, you can't advance unless you are also being inclusive? And so really creating these, I should say integrating inclusive behaviors into your values and your norms and your leadership competencies is a really important lever to create change in an organization.
Great. I'm going to take one more question. We are a few minutes before the end of our session, so we'll go ahead and do one more. Just so you know, I will leave the session up for a few minutes afterwards. That way, if you do have a question, go ahead and still enter it in the Q&A module. I'll be sure to get it over to our presenters after today's call, and we'll make sure to include it in that follow-up blog post with today's key takeaways. So the last one, this person is in higher ed, and they were wondering if you've seen any studies or specific focus on innovation in that industry recently.
I think I'll toss this one to either Dr. Talbot or maybe Sarah. If you've come across something, that'd be great. If not, then we can of course take a look at what we've got and follow up in the blog post. But I wanted to give you guys a chance first.
I'm not. I haven't seen anything specific to the industries, to the university industry. I haven't seen anything, but we can follow up with you. Sarah, have you seen anything?
I can't say that I can speak to other kind of similar studies. I can say that I think the challenges in higher ed are very similar. So as a sort of decentralized organization with a variety of different populations, I think that this, really resonates. I think we're, trying to have conversations across different subject matters, across different types of employees, and so happy to say more about sort of our experiences in rolling this out, but I can't speak to other institutions.
We've had a few people chiming in the chat field, a few other schools who have implemented similar programs, so I'll be sure to pass that along. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up just so we don't go over time. So I would like to go ahead and wrap things up and say thanks again to our speakers from today, and thanks to everyone who attended for your time and attention. We do hope that you'll join us again for our future webinars. Until then, catch up on any content that you've missed by downloading past recordings. These are available at gpstrategies.com. I wish everyone on the call a wonderful and productive rest of your week. Thank you.